Present today. Um, like when we're working with young people with complex needs, it's not uncommon to get overwhelmed by just like all the fires we feel like we're putting out and all of the intense safety concerns. And sometimes what happens is we forget about those basic skills that really make a huge difference for the young person as well as the family and the whole team. And so, given that we're new to the year again and sort of kickstarting, we thought this would be a nice topic to refresh ourselves. And so I have a friend that whenever I say I'm preaching to the choir, she's like, Sharon, choirs need practice. And I was looking for secular words that equate to that for those of you who aren't involved where choir is. And, convincing the convinced is really a lot of what we're doing today. But these are good refreshers. There's nothing going to be earth shattering today, but hopefully hopefully some prompts and ideas that will get you thinking about the way we're supporting the families. So, thinking about the basics is, a lot of you have hopefully heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and we often need to meet families where they are. For some of the families we're working with, the first day we come to them, they might be, homeless. They might have food insecurities. They might not be sleeping because of safety concerns. And these are all completely important and legitimate areas that we need to be working on. I remember once when I was serving families in our wraparound program in our county, we asked a mom, like, what would be most helpful to you? And she said, my kids' clothes stink. I can't wash them. My washer and dryer broke a long time ago. I can't get to a laundromat. They're getting bullied at school. If you can help me make their clothes stink less, I think I can maybe function a little bit better. Not anything what we expected. Another family once said to us, I miss church. I miss having that sense of community. I miss having faith. I want to figure out a way to go back to church and not have everyone look at my child with autism like I'm a bad parent. Can you help me do that? And so sometimes what we think we need to be working on isn't always where the families are, and it sometimes falls into these other needs that are also really important. Um, Another area that we talk about is this difference between being safe and feeling safe. And so I took Maslow's hierarchy of needs and sort of morphed them a little bit into this sense of safety. And an example I was thinking about is my husband and I have very different driving skills. And I am notorious for like gripping a bar or something all the time while he's driving. He's very aggressive and likes to zip around. And he's like, what's wrong with you? You're safe. Well, being safe and feeling safe are very different, right? Am I technically safe? Probably, but I don't feel safe the way he drives. And you think after 30 years he'd figure that out, or maybe I'd figure out I should just drive when I'm with him. Um, and so that's what happens a lot of times with families. We think they are safe. We think young people are safe. We think school is safe or visits with us are safe. But the reality is, all of those traumas, all of those other interactions that they've had don't make them feel safe. And so it's really important as we're meeting with them and we're starting with this grounding of have we created an opportunity where families can say, you know what, I'm willing to answer at least your questions, mostly honestly, but I'm at least willing to talk all the way through dependability and valuing families and then meeting that actualization, like there's hope and a way forward. And so thinking about the way that we interact with them and being intentional about that is really important so that they're feeling that hope as part of this process with us. So for all of these tips, I thought it would be good to just go back to the basics and think about ways that we can establish felt safety. And again, some of these they're not earth shattering, right? They're hopefully things that many of you are doing religiously, but recognizing what happens when we don't do them. Being on time, recognizing how valuable their time is. And I know when I was doing home visits and you'd sort of say to families, well, I like to spend the time that I need to with families and I'll call you when I'm on my way because I want to be respectful. But sometimes you do get caught up in things and you don't realize like what being late can do to somebody, even when you do call or text and let them know you're on their way. Being present. I think this is getting harder and harder to do as more and more notes are required in online systems, and we're sitting there and we're on our computers and we're half listening because we're trying to make sure we're filling in the right boxes. And we don't always hear what families are saying to us. Being curious, asking questions, not because we're judgy and we're trying to like get the dirt on them, but we want to learn more. We want to understand where they're coming from. Being honest, being helpful, and then being kind. I always, when I'm training new staff or students, say, people don't care how much you know until they know you care. you've got to just take a step back and realize that that's more important than all the letters behind your name and the expectations that you have for the guidance you're going to be able to share. Are there any other ones actually about, I don't have my chat open here, but if there are other ones that, I don't know, I can't see my chat, so we're going to have to just go with it. That's what happens when I turn all the other screens off. So I'll have to check those out later. I can't find the bar right now. All right, there it is. Hold on.
You approve of this stuff.
Oh, I missed that.
Are you talking to me? No. Hmm.
I'll let you all mute. So I did have the baseball thing going on. I was not watching the Reds last night, but I started this presentation earlier, and then as I was looking at the Reds and coming to this, I was like, oh, teams, baseball, this just makes so much sense. So perfect timing, right? So, except for I skipped a slide because I was trying to find the chat. Oh, now I'm really getting ahead of myself. All right, connection before correction. So we've talked about this a little bit already, but it's really important that we're spending time not just making connections with the families, but helping families find their own connections. We hear over and over again in these cases each week about the isolation that a lot of the families and the caregivers and parents feel, that they don't feel that they can go to their families and friends anymore because their child's behavior is alienated everyone, or the young people have been abandoned and disappointed by so many of the adults that are supposed to be there for them. They don't know who they can turn to. And so a lot of times we think about like, oh, we've got to fix this diagnosis and we got to fix this behavior. And sometimes I want to just take a step back and say, we just want to make sure that this person knows that people care about them, even if we're the only ones in their lives right now that do that. I think about when I have a really good day or a really bad day, who I call and who I share that information with. And I can't imagine what that would be like to go through life to not have those people that I rely on to share that news with. It's also important to realize that as much as we love our kids and as much as we appreciate our parents, we need breaks from each other. Respite is like one of the highest needs that comes up over and over and over again, and trying to figure out ways to be creative and make that happen, so that they can reconnect sometimes with other siblings, with other kids, with uh, taking a nap with their own bodies is also super important. Um, okay, I'll come back to that, Jessica. Yes, thank you. And then recognizing that, the youth need to sometimes have a place in this world. When I'm looking at the cases that come by, I see that theme frequently about young people not knowing, like, what does my future mean? Where do I fit in? I remember working with a young person, and their family was super involved and very passionate. And this was 20 some years ago. And ADHD meds were scary for some families and they weren't sure. And this family in particular just kept saying, like, I don't want to do meds. I don't want to do meds. I feel like we can figure this out. And they tried every treatment under the sun. And finally, in about fifth or sixth grade, they tried meds. And the second day of school, the young man came back and said, Mom, I have friends. Kids like me. And the parents felt so awful, but then also so relieved that they were able to figure out a way to help him have that connection. So what are some of those back to the basic ways to build those connections? Peer supports for the youth and the caregivers. And I use caregivers and parents interchangeably. I want to recognize that a lot of the people that are supporting our young people are not always their biological parents, but serving in that role. Giving them an opportunity to talk to people who have lived experience, who get it in ways that some of us can't get it and understand, can really make a huge difference. And for some families, and this is one, I don't like to have an all or nothing, but some online resources are safe and are appropriate. We've had a lot of families that say, I'm not comfortable going to a support group, but I'll jump on an online forum and, closed group on Facebook, to get support and ideas and to feel like this is a good fit for me. One of my favorite things that we used to do is creating play dates. We would look at our caseload and say, okay, I know this kiddo doesn't have a lot of friends and likes this. And then my coworker would say, well, I have this kiddo that is kind of in the same boat and we all like baseball. Let's all go to the Reds game together and take the youth down there and see what it might be like. And creating those supervised and supportive ways for kids to practice making friends and feeling connected. And then, it was a win-win. We got to spend time together with my coworkers that I liked, and the kids got to spend some time together. And then similarly, sometimes kids need to be around other kids, but they need that extra support. And it could be those of you who are serving the case manager role or who have peer supports in your organizations or can pay for mentors, especially, younger mentors. Like nobody wants to go to the YMCA with me anymore. I get that. But 25 years ago, I was a lot more fun probably and could do a lot more. And going to the Boys and Girls Club and hanging out like as a big sister with the kids so that they had that extra support was really beneficial and helpful to model and mentor and be there until we could start to say, okay, now I'm going to be in the other room for a little bit and go from there. Sometimes respite might mean as a worker that you're asking the family, like, I'm going to take your kid out for an hour and we're going to go for a walk. When would be a good time for you so that you can do something that you wouldn't get to do normally? It's not long term, it's not traditional, but again, even those short little breaks can make a big difference for families. And I feel like we're getting away from this more and more than what we used to do. But case management and therapy doesn't always have to be in a traditional office setting. Taking young people for a walk, going to McDonald's, going to a park. I am a terrible, it's any sport, but I can play horse. I can't play any other type of basketball, right? But just playing horse with a young person and chatting with them out there and talking with them, they're going to open up in ways that they wouldn't do in a traditional office setting. And so that sometimes is another way to start building those connections because other people are out and about and doing that. All right, now we're on the baseball theme. So another big part of the back to the basics is working on collaboration. So why would you want to work with a team? What are the benefits of doing this with other people? And I think this is one of the things that the teams that present are extraordinary. I'm always in awe at how much they communicate and collaborate and support each other. So what are the benefits of that? You can just use the chat or you can unmute and call out real quick if you want.
It's a collaboration of lots of different ideas that you might not think of yourself.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. More ideas, right? Brainstorming together, resilience.
The world is full of individuals and individual experience.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's more fun, I think. I mean, nobody liked to do group projects in high school and college. I get that, but this is different, right? Like we're brainstorming, we're tag teaming, we're saying, "I'm spent, I need a minute, it's your turn," or vice versa. You can have more consistency, so we're using the same language and the same expectations, and we're not all kind of rowing in different directions. Um, Often there's less burnout. There's just so many good reasons to work together with teams. And I like to think that the family and the youth are part of your team. It's not just you doing this alone with whatever your role is with the family and the system. And so getting that youth's perspective is really important. Sometimes they can't come to meetings or don't want to come to meetings or don't feel safe coming to meetings, but connecting with them and saying, what you want to do and how you want this to happen and how help should look is really important. And how do we make sure that we're always taking that into consideration? How do we work with the family to say what works for you? How can we best help you? Instead of just saying, oh, by the way, this is what we decided we're doing for your young person. And you just kind of have to follow along. Um, and then, that co-creating goals and recognizing that there's expertise in every aspect of what we do is really important. So the back to the basics of this. Yes, they are the star of the team. I like that, right? When are you having meetings? Whose needs are you meeting? Are the meetings happening when parents are working, when the therapist is always got other clients? Is there a way to come up with something and negotiate a time that works well for having everyone who should be at the table at the table? Having ground rules, and this isn't just for meetings. This is when you're collaborating with people to say, what, it takes me a few days to email you back. If you really need to reach me immediately, this is how you do it, or please expect me to communicate this way. And then even asking the team within the parameters of your agency, like what kind of communication works best for you. For those of you who are serving in service coordination roles and like wraparound facilitator roles, a lot of times we're having a meeting. Do you want me to remind you a couple days in advance of all the things you said you were going to do beforehand so you've got time to prepare? Do we need to set up a group text? What's going to work? One of the things that's also important is honoring your commitments. if you don't follow through, and it happens to the best of us, we all get super busy, but people are going to stop asking you to be part of the collaboration. And then it's also super important that you build your own networks and you nurture those networks. Having time, if you've got to go out to lunch, to go get coffee, to ask people who are on, serving in other capacities. So maybe you're working at juvenile court and you want to talk to the therapist and say, I'd love to learn more about what you do and how this works and what are the things that work well for you at your system and how can we work together better. Again, it just makes it more fun when you're working with people you truly enjoy. The other reality, not that we want any of you to ever leave, is this is how a lot of us have advanced through our careers, right? It's like when someone has an opening and they're like, oh, I love working with them. They've been so awesome and I've really gotten to know them well. And it helps you establish your own professional ladder for, opportunities for you down the road. But nobody leave your jobs now because then I'll get yelled at for suggesting that. Okay, I like that you're doing that. Like, well, yes, the late evenings is important. So another aspect of going back to the basics is thinking about how are we focusing not just on strength or not just on their symptoms, but we're putting the strengths over those symptoms. We're recognizing what's going well. And this is not to sugarcoat the things that aren't going well, but sometimes we look at something and say, like, that is a maladaptive behavior or that is not appropriate. And the reality is what they're doing is a trauma response and is a survival response, and it's building opportunities for them in other ways. And so it's sort of like taking that kind of, we harness that good for evil and turning that strength into something that we can put into a plan. We hear a lot about young people like working with animals, or they enjoy working with their hands, or they want to be helpful to younger people. When you know that that's what helps a child feel good about themselves, and this can simultaneously in parallel with a family member, how can you integrate that into a plan so that what you're suggesting to them is going to be useful and meaningful for them and not just a cookie cutter plan? It's also really important that you celebrate the small wins and successes, because not every day is going to be easy. And when you can remind them of all the great things that have been going on, it makes it a lot more tolerable and easier when you have to kind of regroup them and say, yes, things are really hard right now, but let's go backwards a little bit and see all the progress that you made. So some ways you can do this are, if you're not familiar with the reflect, honor, and connect method of valuing what they have to share and appreciating that their comfort level and sharing that with you, and then figuring out a way to say, okay, now how can I use, like, how can I be of most help to you, or how can I help you feel safe? I realized I asked a couple younger people today on campus, do you know who Pollyanna is? And they all looked at me like I had 10 heads. So for those of you who are not familiar with, I had to look it up, like 1913 novel, apparently. But Pollyanna was like this toxic optimist that no matter what happened, she was always going to find that silver lining. And that is, if you do it too much, it's toxic, right? Nobody wants to be around that. So you can be strength-based without it always being like, oh, it's going to be okay. Like the sun will come out tomorrow. So just keep that in the back of your mind. I know when I first started doing wraparound, and that came up a couple times, and we're like, why do you have to always be so strength-based? Validating people's emotions and the hardships is important too. So as part of that, we also want to recognize that there's usually meaning, maybe it's over the diagnosis, but maybe sometimes it's meaning within the diagnosis. One of the big phrases we hear in wraparound a lot is that big behaviors come from unmet needs. And if we can understand the why behind those big behaviors, we can tailor the interventions to meet the needs. So it's not always about explosive behaviors and disruptive behaviors. Sometimes it's, this helps me feel safe, or this helps me feel connected, or this helps me avoid something that makes me feel really icky. And so if I can get out of doing that, then I feel safe again, leading often to a trauma response situation. And so it's really important that individually and as a team, you want to peel back that onion and say, okay, let's dig into not just what's going on, but why is this happening? And then maybe we can tailor that intervention accordingly. And Mike, I promise you, I'm always conscious of that clock. That's why I'm talking even faster as I go through these last slides, which we are going to run out of time at this rate. So I'll fly through some of these. You'll have access to the slides if I can ever figure out what's wrong with my file and why it won't upload. But really focusing on, dissecting those behaviors is going to make a difference. And on that note, I think it's important that we talk about possibilities and problems, because families who are going through these situations are experiencing some significant frustration and stress. And if we only focus on the things that are going well, we're discounting how hard life can really be. And for those of you who are too young to know who the Sandlot character is, I'm also really sad because it's one of the best baseball movies ever. It took my children 10 years before they finally would watch it with me. And they're like, okay, Mom, that wasn't so bad. So you want to focus on progress and not just perfection, and recognize how much hope and faith doesn't have to just be faith in a higher power, but faith that things can get better and that they will work out, as part of that hope is integral in helping families feel like there is a future. So how do you do that with the back to the basics? You value and honor the passion that they bring. I never got upset when parents yelled, because when they yelled, it meant they cared. It meant that they wanted things to get better, even if they were yelling at me. So that was something I appreciated and valued. You'll see the Pollyanna in here again, because it's really important. Be a hope holder sometimes when families can't be a hope holder. Sometimes it's okay for them to have some despair, as long as you're holding that hope and can hand it back to them. It's also important to chunk your goals. It shouldn't just be, these high-arching goals that seem unachievable. You want to do smaller ones that you can celebrate. So what are those final thoughts and takeaways in my last 30 seconds? These were some quotes I found from some famous baseball players, real and not. But never let the fear of striking out keep you from playing the game. Sometimes we have to take supportive risks to do something a little outside the box in this work. And it's hard to beat up a person who doesn't give up. All I know is when we win a game, a team wins. And when we lose a game, it's a team loss, from the Bad News Bears and the Reds and the Bengals. And a life is not important except in the impact it has on other lives. So I think that sums up a lot of what we do and why we do what we do. So I was hoping we have a few seconds to put some takeaways from this, but hopefully you'll be reflective and think about some of those things that you've done in the past that maybe you haven't been able to do as much as you'd like, that you'll be able to take away moving forward.